Hey guys, welcome to the Occupied Life. Today I have a very special guest. She is an old friend of mine, Dianna Penn. Almost said your maiden name again. And she's a speech therapist. We have a shared background. We both worked as missionaries overseas. In fact, she's sort of the reason my family ended up over there, but we never were there at the same time. She's now working for the state of Alabama. She has a lot of work history working with children who have autism spectrum disorders. I know she has a lot of experience with assistive technology as well. And we're gonna do an interview and just kind of share what she knows and maybe some things that you hear in this interview will be helpful to you. Will benefit your child. So, Dianna, thanks for being here. First thing, if you could just tell me kind of what you're doing right now.
Okay, so I work for the state of Alabama, but I work for a division of Alabama Department of Rehab Services. I work for Children's Rehab Service. Most people have heard of early intervention and vocational rehab, but Children's Rehab Service is a little less known. We actually have a running joke that we're the only state agency that has to work hard to market ourselves. There is also a program under ADRS, which is called the SAIL program, and that's the State of Alabama Independent Living. And I give you kind of an idea of all of those divisions because I am the only speech therapist that works for Alabama Department of Rehab Services in the Montgomery office. So I kind of offer some consult as needed with EI, vocational rehab, and SAIL. A large part of what I do is specialty clinics. I am the coordinator for our ACT clinic, which is Augmentative Communication Technology clinic. And so we have evaluations that we will do on a regular basis for children across the state of Alabama. I service 14 counties. I service the Montgomery area and the Opelika area. So anyone who's living in any of those counties surrounding that, if they need an augmentative communication evaluation and they're a client of ours, they can come to us for that. And so that is all of our teams, all of our evaluation clinics are multidisciplinary team approaches. So there's a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a social worker, and myself that's a part of that evaluation. I also do feeding clinic and cleft palate clinic and kind of help out and offer resources for some of the other clinics as well as needed. But that's kind of the majority of what I do.
So I'm currently working in a school system in Alabama. If we had a student who was having feeding issues or some communication difficulty and we weren't sure what to do, we would go to you guys. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so there are offices across the state of Alabama. Like I said, I'm in the Montgomery and the Opelika area. We have a main office in Montgomery, and then we have a smaller office in Opelika, so I cover both of those. We also have an office in Huntsville that covers the Muscle Shoals area, an office in Tuscaloosa that covers the Selma area. We have a Homewood office. We have an Anniston office, which will cover the Pell City, St. Clair area, all of that. And then we have an Andalusia office, which will cover the Dothan area, which I think might be closer to where you are. And then we have a Mobile office. So yes, you could contact the speech therapist or the occupational therapist at that office and just say, hey, this is what we've got going on. And we could get that child in for an evaluation. And our feeding clinics, we assess for, it could be a swallowing deficit, or it could be a child who has some sensory issues and they have a very limited diet, or it could be that they're simply not consuming foods and they've got a malnutrition issue. That team is run by a nutritionist, a dietitian, and then there's also an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a nurse, and a social worker, as well as myself on the feeding clinic team.
Okay, when you're referring to clinics, does that mean that the client comes to you? You don't necessarily come to the client.
Most of the time they do come to us, to our office for that team to evaluate. There are some occasions where we have gone to a certain location. I myself have done some ACT, augmentative communication clinics in a school setting because I've had 3 kids in the same school that needed to be evaluated. And so it just makes it easier. I can have the teachers and the school speech therapist and occupational therapist be a part of that evaluation process. That's the other thing. We do welcome outside therapists or educational staff to come and be a part of our teams. They can come and sit in and offer input.
Okay. So I know that, we've worked, you and I have worked side by side and done a lot of co-treatments over the years. And so I know kind of a lot about your working style, more so than I might some random interview. But for me, I always like these stories where we really were able to come up with some strategy that really had an impact on some child's life, or it helped the family in some significant way. Are there any stories, to put you on the spot a little bit, that you can think of that, like, you remember those stories? Those are the things that kind of keep you going.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that stands out the most to me is actually a student that you and I worked with together in Georgia, who language-wise, he had the language, like he had the vocabulary, all of that, he had like the basic language capabilities. So when you did an evaluation, he didn't qualify for language intervention. And this was back in the 90s when things were a lot different, and we didn't offer services as readily as we do now. We know a lot more now than we did then. But there was a child who I just knew that there was way more going on. It was a lot of that pragmatic use of language and the social language skills and being able to understand the nuances of language that he didn't get. And I remember trying to evaluate him with not a great assessment, but it was the only one we really had access to. And I couldn't get him to sit long enough to do it. And I remember you came in and you gave me some things that we could do sensory wise. And he was able to participate a little bit in the assessment, and then he would walk off and he would engage in some sensory things, on the swing and on the ball, and then he would come back to the table and he'd finish taking a little bit more of the test, and back and forth until I was able to get the test finished and actually make a recommendation for some services and get a good plan for him that I don't know that I would have gotten otherwise. So that's one that really changed my mind about sensory integration, even though I was a believer in it.
I know what you're talking about. The thoughts that I have about some of those things is that I have many times over the years recommended to a speech therapist to get their kids to be more active, because they talk about a kid who's not really talking much, even though they have some vocabulary. And there's just something magical about getting them moving, that all of a sudden they start barking commands. Especially, I know you used to sort of get in their way and create problems for them. And they're like, "Miss Dianna, would you get out of the way, please?" So those are.
We had another one who that we worked with together, and he really didn't have hardly any functional language. He had a lot of rote, imitative, non-functional speech. It wasn't even really language skills. It was just rote speech. And I remember we put him on the swing and we were talking about things and discussing things just on that platform swing. And he really started to communicate and talk about some of the pictures we were looking at and So those were really some kind of eye-opening beginning moments for me. So having worked with you in that environment, I always seek out occupational therapists because I think that collaboration is just priceless.
Yeah, I'm kind of a broken record with my therapy. I say to parents and to whoever will listen, get your kids on the ground, make them work on the ground, and if they're not talking, make them do some physical activities and just get them out there and get them active, and it's sort of the whole system kicks in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, so tell me, kind of switching gears a little bit. Tell me about the assistive technology part of your job. You said in a text to me that you are doing teletherapy evaluations with augmentative communication.
Yeah. So with COVID-19, when everything kind of came to a screeching halt, I worked from home a good bit, and I probably had about 8 devices that they were either already at the office or coming into the office that I had to get delivered. So we started, I couldn't let these devices just sit. These kids needed these devices. So we started working out these arrangements where either if they were, over an hour from me, I would mail them directly to the family, or if they were close by, I would take them to the family's house and drop them off. And we started using Zoom actually through the help of the device rep and actually doing our setups that way. And so we would call in, everybody would call in, and we would do our training on setting the devices up with the family through virtual telehealth means. And then we would do a small activity, some kind of session with the kid so that we could make sure that the child understood how to use it. So that was kind of our start. And because we're still having an increase of cases here in Alabama, we are utilizing telehealth some. Now, I can't do it for every kid. It's not appropriate for every kid. But I've had several kids who have either had a device before, or they've been trialing a device with their outpatient therapist prior to COVID, or they trialed it somewhere else for a brief period of time. And so I had one child just recently that his mom had a copy of the app on her iPad, and they had been kind of practicing with it. And so mom just had her iPad out with her for the evaluation, and I created some videos. I asked mom, I said, what motivates him? What really is something that he would work for? And she said, this is going to sound crazy, but he makes videos of himself. He really likes to see himself. And I said, okay, well, send me a couple of them and we'll use that. So one of them is just him kind of dancing around in the living room. And so I put an icon of go up on my screen and an icon of stop on my screen. And I just said, hey, if you want me to make the video go, tell me go. And he had the icon as his prompt, and he sure enough went to his device and hit go. So we played it. And then I hit stop, and I would say, okay, well, I'm going to make it stop. And he immediately hit go again. So we did that a few times. And then the other video was of him eating. And so I had a picture of him up, and I had the prompt for eat. And he went in there and hit eat, So then a little bit later, he hit drink, and I was like, oh, I don't have a video of you drinking. And he got up from his mom and left and went to the kitchen and got his cup and brought it back in and started drinking. And I was like,
there you go.
Okay, I think we get it. We did a few more things. I actually took his face and cut it out, and I put it on the screen, and I had an up and a down icon. And if he told me up, then I would make the picture go up. If he told me down, I'd make the picture go down. I put his face in a little car, and I had the prompts for go fast, and he found on the device go fast. And so I made the car go across really fast. And so mean, we were able to do that assessment and see that he could find those icons successfully, and make a determination they need the device. So that was interesting.
Are you seeing a lot of that device use going to the smartphone or an iPad versus a standalone device? I know that we used to do a lot with different devices. I kind of dabbled in assistive technology many years ago.
So yes and no. In the school systems, iPads are very readily accessible. A lot of school systems now have kind of a fleet of iPads, and they're buying communication software in bulk. So it's good in the sense that kids are getting access to stuff. The problem is that there's maybe there are probably about 4 softwares that are available right now that are pretty common and pretty popular. Different areas, certain ones are more popular than others. The problem with that is a school system that doesn't really focus on assistive technology, like really study it and have people going to trainings and really understanding the language systems. They're saying, okay, I can get app A for this much money and we'll put it on all our iPads. What may be appropriate for this kid, but not for this kid. And so kind of getting this more of a cookie cutter approach. So what we really do, we try to work with the school systems. That's another part of what we do is we go out and we provide trainings. We'll consult with them. You know, however we can support the school system, we feel that we're supporting our clients. But if a child has been using an iPad with an app, we try to get them into our clinic and do an evaluation so that we can then buy them a device, because the devices are more durable. With that tempered hardened glass or Gorilla Glass, which is even more durable. They've got really good hard cases for protection. So it's the longevity of the device is going to be so much better. The other thing is it's dedicated. So they can't go in and play games. It's only for communication.
Can't get on Facebook.
Exactly. Exactly. For our little ones. Now, we have some adults that come through. Like I just evaluated a young man, 23, I think, with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and used an eye gaze device, did really, really well. You know, he was using the keyboard, so he was typing everything out, like long sentences for a simple answer. Those types of individuals will help them with the process of getting that device opened up so that they can use it for social media, so they can use it for email, they can use it for internet, for environmental control, so that they can control their lights in their house, their television, their radio, those types of things as well.
Okay, yeah, I started to ask you the age of the typical person that's going to be that you're going to evaluate and that might end up using a device. You sort of touched on that, but kind of where's the bulk of it?
The bulk of what I'm doing is probably somewhere between 4 and 18. That's the general population that I'm seeing. Yeah. Generally. However, remember when I was telling you there are 4 divisions of ADRS? There's EI, which is birth to 3. There's CRS, which is birth to 21. So there's some overlap with EI. And there's voc rehab, which is around 15 on, depending on, I mean, it could go on for a while because they help them with their college. So they could be, you know, in their late 20s still going to college, and voc rehab could still be involved with them. And then our SAIL program, which is for adults. So if any of those clients needed a communication device and they're not a CRS client, then the SAIL person would contact me, or the EI person would contact me, and we would assist that client as well.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So when we were getting ready for this interview, one of the things I shared with you is just kind of the purpose of this YouTube channel of mine is that I'm really trying to equip and prepare my clients for get them ready for life or ready for the next stage in life. So I always kind of want to point in that direction. If you have a young child who doesn't get this piece of their communication, whereas they could benefit from some assistive technology, what happens to them down the road? Is that, I don't know if that's a question you could even answer, but can you kind of paint the adult life for someone like that?
Well, I mean, one of the things like we talked about in our other conversation is about behaviors that will occur when you don't have the ability to communicate. So you may see that happen if you have a child who continues to develop without the ability to effectively communicate. Then you may have some behaviors that occur, and not only will they occur, they could set up patterns, and it could kind of, because that could become their communication. And so now you've established this routine that this is how I'm going to communicate my wants and needs, is through inappropriate behavior. That's a risk that you're running. But the other thing is that you're now going to be dependent on someone else for absolutely everything. Because if you can't communicate effectively in a way in which people outside your family can understand, then you are now dependent on your family. And we all kind of get our worth in being able to be independent and productive, and being able to provide something, you know, in our lives. And if you're depending on someone all the time to be able to communicate, communication impacts everything we do. I mean, every component of what we do, unless you've got someone there anticipating every single need that you have or will have. One of the things when we write these reports for the devices, one of the things we have to talk about is that these clients who need a communication device, without a communication device, they can't have a conversation with their physician. They can't talk to their physician about what their health needs are. They can't make medical decisions on any level without someone else being involved. And now I think we see the weight of that even more with the state of our country. Imagine, you know, these young people who are unable to adequately communicate their medical wishes. That's a very hard place to be in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, in the last video I made, I told a story about when I was a teenager, college age, and a friend in my neighborhood who had autism. I had an encounter with the police, and it was directly related to a lack of ability to communicate. It could have been a really bad situation, but you know, fortunately, it didn't go that way. I just happened to walk outside when the encounter happened, and I was able to inform the police officer about this guy, but he had no sense of what was going on. So, yeah, that's another example of how, you know, if he had a better way of communicating, that whole situation maybe could have been avoided.
Yeah. And I think too, you don't have to go straight to a communication device. There are picture symbols, there are communication boards, there are lower tech means of communication. Anything that's going to make you more independent with your communication is going to improve your quality of life, but it's also going to set up a foundation for the potential to move into something that's more comprehensive. And that's what a lot of times my families, they want a communication device right then and there, and the child may not have the readiness skills for that. So we'll start a little bit lower, establish those foundational skills, but also teaching them a
What are
means
the,
of,
I'm sorry, what are the foundational skills that you're referring to?
um, so, okay, here's a great example. I have a young man that we're going to evaluate for a communication device. He is a quadriplegic. He has no movement, no functional movement whatsoever, other than his eyes. And he's also got some significant visual impairment. So at this point in time, being able to calibrate a communication device that uses eye gaze is not going to be effective because he has such visual impairment. He also doesn't recognize symbols. He doesn't have picture discrimination. In general, with a picture exchange system, if you're just using two pictures and you're picking them up and giving them, you don't have to have clear picture discriminate. Like, you don't have to know that this is a cup. I just know that this picture gets me my cup. But if you don't have the physical capability of handing that, so you're depending on someone else, that complicates it. So after talking with the school-based speech therapist and the mother, we've decided that we're going to work on some high contrast picture symbols through eye gaze, just to get that foundational skill, so that first we understand that that's what this picture is. We also need to play with the distance, what's going to work best for him visually. We need all of these things first before we can start to look at an eye gaze device. So that's kind of one of those foundational skills that we might be looking at. Every kid's different though.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, all right. I don't want to keep you much longer, but I wanted to ask you, so obviously your area of expertise is with speech-related devices, but do you have a knowledge of assistive technology outside of communication? Is it unfair to ask you that?
I mean, I think it depends on, do I think it's as strong as communication devices? Absolutely not. But yeah, I think I'm learning more.
The reason I'm asking you is I was just wondering if you could give if you maybe could give kind of a quick picture of other areas that you might use assistive technology in.
So we have been, one of the things that we've been using a little bit more is the liftware utensils for feeding. They have two different types. They have one that is a leveler, so no matter where you pull it, it's gonna keep the spoon level. So the utensil piece, the spoon utensil piece, goes into a larger handle. So when it goes in, no matter where they turn it, however they turn it, the spoon's always going to stay level so that they don't lose what's in it to get to their mouth. Then they have another one, which is great for Parkinson's. It keeps it steady. So no matter how much you shake, this always stays steady as it's coming to the mouth. So those are a couple of things we have had some exposure to, and we've made some recommendations for. We made a recommendation for a child to get essentially a robotic arm feeder. I was kind of on our own, so I had a little bit of exposure to it, but it's really hard. That one's really hard to get the measurements and the angle and all of that right. But that was for a child with arthrogryposis, so she had no hand movement whatsoever.
Yeah, some of the, I know that the technology is always getting better, but some of the technology, like some of the feeding tools and things like that, it's not just enough just to identify a tool that might work, but then there's this process. It's almost like a whole new set of skills you have to learn to be able to access those things appropriately. I know that's the same with some of the communication devices as well, but it's sort of a process. Are you guys involved in the ongoing therapeutic process of helping them to get up to speed with some of these things?
So yeah, so one of the the main thing we do in children's rehab service is clinics, specialty clinics. So we'll do evaluations, and we have a whole host. Like we have a cleft palate clinic, we have an orthopedic clinic, we have a seating, positioning, and mobility, which is for the most part like a wheelchair clinic. We help kids get their wheelchairs. We have a seizure clinic, a hemophilia clinic. So we'll do all of these initial clinic evaluations. We'll do the assessment. We have a hearing clinic. We have an audiologist on staff. So we'll do the evaluation. We'll make our recommendations. And then if there's any equipment at the time of delivery, we will provide training for that. But then we also, it's not always like a planned time that we're going to see them again, but we're constantly following up. And anytime the school system has an issue, or an outpatient therapist has an issue, or a parent, needs some additional training, then we'll follow up again. As far as augmentative communication is concerned, I try to do 2 to 3 trainings every year with the device companies, where they will come in, bring the devices in, and we'll have some hands-on training for therapists and for the parents, so that we're making sure that people feel comfortable using these devices. And I've gone into a couple of different school systems and done some trainings.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, Dianna, I know I could go on and ask you lots and lots of questions, but I'm trying to. I think my self-imposed timeline, I've already passed that. But I do appreciate you being willing to do this for me. Dianna's she has a wealth of knowledge on things related to therapy for children, and it's just a privilege for me to be friends with her and have access to her. So, Dianna, I appreciate your time, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So, guys, remember to check out my other videos. They talk about some of the things that we referenced here. Also, the shorter version, the interview 2, which I've just started with Dianna, is going to be a much shorter video than this one. So check that one out as well. All right, y'all take care.
Thanks so much.